Go ahead.
Okay. Hey, Nancy.
Hi, Michael.
So I came in today, and much like when students are doing meaningful work, I check in with students and I ask what they're learning, and I did a little bit of that, but I wanted to focus more on the group that you are working with here. And so you were reading the Bear in the Woods?
It's the biggest bear.
Oh, I see. So, all right. So, right, they were reading The Biggest Bear.
Right.
And so, from my perspective, it looked like it was an advanced reading group.
Yeah, it was. But a child who was struggling reading brought this book in for show and tell yesterday. And I always liked it when I used to read it to the kids years ago. I hadn't seen it in a while, and I knew I had several copies of it. I've been looking for something that's high interest for boys in the classroom. And so when I saw this book, I got kind of excited. So I knew it was a little bit difficult for him, but I decided I would try it with all the reading groups just to see how they all did with it. So I read it to them first, and we discussed it because there's a lot of interesting discussion with this book because the little boy is allowed to carry a gun into the woods, which is very controversial. It certainly wouldn't be allowed to happen in this day and age. But
Right.
when this book was written, I think 1952, and it got the Caldecott medal at that time. I don't think it ever got a medal these days with the topic that it deals with. But it was a good discussion about gun safety and children staying away from guns and all that. So we did a little bit of that in the morning meeting. And I asked them if they thought they would like to try reading it. And so at their snack time, I went around and collected as many books as I could find in my collection of books there. And so I had like 5 copies, so I asked them if they'd like to do it in a reading group. And they said, they wanted to try it. And most of the hard words in the books are people's names. There's a lot of neighbors in the book.
Yeah.
And so that's just, I just tell them the names and I'm not too concerned. But basically it has a lot of their words that they've been working on, their basic sight vocabulary. And I was kind of pleased the way they reacted to it and how interested they were in it. And they seemed to handle it pretty well. So I did do it with all the groups, and I did it with the little boy that brought it in. And this was the first time I saw him really light up and really, get involved with something that I was doing.
Oh, that's great.
I think, if I can work through this book and find other books that are appropriate for him, I think I'll be pretty happy with that. So
That's
but it was all, sort of like last time you were in the crabs.
Right.
I find my best teaching is when I go with the child.
Exactly.
And that's where he was with this book. I'm trying to really motivate him and get him excited. And it's a really nice copy of the book, so I just went with it.
And so do you think that you achieved your objective?
I think so. For him, I definitely feel that, he took it back to his seat and went through it again, and I said, you can take it home, and I'm sure your dad will work with you on it. And I had spent some time on the internet looking for books that would be highly motivating for children who, were kind of reluctant readers. It would be kind of easy. And I know that some of it's kind of, easy, but other pages, are more difficult.
The illustrations are fantastic.
I love the illustrations in this book, and it does remind me of a book from the 1950s, and I always liked it. So it made me smile when I saw him with the book.
There was, I have one question. You have, so I've seen this in a lot of classes with how teachers use their interactive instruction, and they may work with one student while the kids are doing meaningful work, or they may work with a group of students, or they may have the group of students read it aloud, or they may read aloud to the group of students, or however they utilize the interactive instruction model here in the separate section of their room. You have all the students read silently as they're going through the book, and then you go to one student and then read with that student, wherever they are in the book, and then you start to read with that student.
Again, right.
So when I was here for the...
Sort of like a whisper read, but some of them are a little bit louder than a whisper, but it doesn't seem to really bother the other ones.
No, not at all. I was actually impressed how for instance, when you were discussing the word you had due south,
right.
Yeah. D-U-E, it was sort of, I mean, that could really be a difficult word and confuse a first grader. And then you sort of gave the explanation of due south means directly south, and due north would be directly in the opposite direction. And so that was really great to see that interaction as well.
In the book he takes the bear due south, due north, due west.
So it keeps coming up.
Yeah, it does. Another word that keeps coming up is a word that I was given for spelling was the word pretty. And so, it was said it was pretty hard, and it was pretty difficult, and
so there were good connections to other curricular aspects.
Yes.
And so the students in the working on their activities, which of course their activities are always abundant and meaningful here. I really enjoyed seeing them select pieces of magazines and responding to their reading from a magazine. I really enjoyed seeing them work on their how-to stories. And I got a couple of questions about that. So first of all, why magazines? Why was everybody instructed at that given time to read from a magazine and then respond to their reading and writing?
Because I don't think children look at magazines. I think a lot of them get them at home, but I'm not sure they read them. And I think they're kind of interesting, their whole another genre of reading. And I had done it a couple of years ago, and I used the little zoo books, and there's kind of there's easy reading in it, and there's some very difficult reading in it, but the cover story usually is the one right inside, and it usually is manageable for the kids to find a couple interesting facts about what they're reading about. And so this is more like informational reading and the informational writing that we're doing, rather than writing stories about themselves. So I went to how-to stories, how to do something. They wrote last week, and they were very interesting, the ones they did it that way. And the magazine stories really seem to, they like doing them, and I'll give them a magazine for homework, and in the form that I made out to draw a picture of something that they read or read about, and then 2 interesting facts. And I'm always interested in what they pick out for the interesting fact, and I tried to encourage them to put it in their own words, but they always do a really nice job. That was the first day they did it, so as we do it a couple times, they do improve.
Yeah, and so it's interesting that there's sort of a genre of writing happening here in first grade as well, with responding to their reading something that's nonfiction, finding specific information, and then writing what they are finding in the passages that are interesting facts. So with one student, I said, "So what are you learning about?" And she says, "Oh, I'm reading this magazine, and I love these bats because they look just like a fox." So it was the flying fox, and the picture of a fox and the picture of the bat, and their faces look the same. And so I said, "So what are you writing about?" She says, "Well, I'm writing about what they eat." And I said, okay, so what do they eat?" And she says, "They eat flies." And I said, "So how do you know you're doing really well with this?" She says, "Well, because I write information down that I've just read." And so when I read it with her, I said, "Can you read this with me?" And so I read it with her, and she said, "Oh, flowers." She says, "I thought all bats ate flies."
I saw the word flowers.
Yeah, and there was a picture. She goes, "Oh yeah, he's eating a flower in that picture."
Yeah.
So it was interesting to talk to her about that as well.
I did one for them first. I did it on the easel board there, and so I modeled how to do it so that they knew exactly what I wanted. I drew the picture. Mine was on monkeys, and picked out 2 interesting facts. I picked out a fact that I liked, that I had read the story to them, and then they told me one that they wanted me to put, so I did that too. So I think it's important to model how to do it, so that I left that up so they could see how I did mine. So
that's great. Okay, Nancy,
it
was a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah.